proceedings, I would like to invite to the stage Elder Margaret. Elder Margaret has attended school on her reserve, graduated from UBC, and for 13 years, the past 13 years, has been a member of the Elders program here at SFU. So I'd like to bring her up to the stage to welcome us to this territory.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
Everybody awake?
Yes.
Good. Welcome to the Coast Salish territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and also welcome to SFU, and welcome to this evening's event. Just to get the meeting started, I will open with a very good prayer for each and every one of you. And you may remain seated. Oh, great Spirit, thank you for bringing us together this evening. Guide us in our words, our thoughts, and our actions. Let us always remember that we are the leaders, the mentors of those who follow us. Let us always use good words and good examples for the young ones, especially the young ones who watch and witness all our actions and our words. And I asked Great Spirit to look after your families while you're away from home and bring you safely back home. I ask again, Great Spirit, to protect each and every one of you as you listen to what is taking place this evening, and guide your hearts, your minds, and just remember that this is our community, this is our land that we talk about when we have sessions like this. And Great Spirit, just bless each and every one of you, all my relations.
And now, the man that needs no introduction, David Suzuki.
I say this just to reflect that for thousands of years, the first people were here and took care of this land. And we haven't done a very good job in the little time that we've been here. C'est Canada et il faut parler français, mais à Vancouver, nous ne parlons pas français. Je ne suis pas bilingue. Excusez-moi. So I'm going to speak in English. But I'd like to say right off at the top, I'm not here to speak on behalf of any group, any organization, any political party or corporation. That's very important that I say that. I am here this evening to speak as a grandfather, and I have a grandson who has cerebral palsy, so it's very important to me who our politicians are. And I have two grandsons who are Indigenous. They live on reserve in Hainagwai, and their future is very important to me too. But I also speak as an elder, and elders, I believe, in our society have a very special role, because no one can accuse us of having an agenda. We're beyond concern about fame or money or power. Well, there are a few elders that still do, but they need help. They've got problems. Most elders are beyond that. You don't have to kiss anybody's ass or play games in order to get a job or a promotion or a raise. We're free to speak the truth from our hearts. And if that pisses someone off, that's their problem, not mine. So I'm here particularly as an elder. And I want to remind you that Mr. Harper's great success has been in uniting a fractured right in order to get into office with a minority of voters. And so I really think that it's important here that we support the progressives and to be sure that we are able to express ourselves. We are in the majority, and it's really important that you, all of you young people, get the heck out there and vote. You see, whoever is elected in this election and whatever Parliament does will have very little effect for me. I'm in the last part of my life. But whoever is elected and what is or is not done in the parliament that follows will reverberate throughout your entire lives. Youth has everything at stake in this election. To me, this is the most important election of my life. And it's absolutely critical that youth who have the biggest stake in who is elected get out there and be a part of the political process. So it's not just a matter of voting, you've got to take part in the discussions and demand of all candidates who are putting themselves out and asking for your vote, where they stand on issues of importance to you. And if you're too young to vote, well, the two warriors on your behalf have got to be your mom and dad. And they've got to get out there and put your issues on the political agenda by going to meetings and raising the issues that you're prevented from voting on. And because, you see, I think we are at an absolutely critical moment for not just Canada, but the entire world today. And having said that, I have to tell you that I've just added a page of notes. I am absolutely elated, and I'll tell you, I haven't been elated for many, many years. Today is the anniversary of the time of the first anniversary when I left to go to Newfoundland and begin a tour on behalf of what we call the Blue Dot Movement. And the movement was to get the support. We chose a very difficult way to do this. Get the support at the grassroots for a constitutional amendment to enshrine the right to a healthy environment, that is clean air, clean water, clean soil, in our Constitution. We believe it should be every Canadian's right to know that being a Canadian means that we guarantee that this is one of the rights of being a citizen. We chose a difficult challenge because the route that we're going to go is to get the grassroots support to pass in local communities and municipalities a declaration for a healthy environment. And if we can get enough of that, that will put pressure on the Premier to pass a bill to protect a healthy environment. And if we can get 7 premiers with more than 50% of Canada's population, we can then go to the federal government and ask for that amendment. That, of course, will not have a chance as long as Mr. Harper is in power. But right now, 83 communities that vary from St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria, from Montreal and Hamilton to Yellowknife, 83 communities have signed our Declaration for a Healthy Environment. That's over 7 million Canadians encompassed in those jurisdictions. And today, the Union of BC Municipalities, all of the municipalities of BC, met and 60% voted 60% for a proposal to go to the BC Premier and get her to pass a law to protect a healthy environment. BC has been fantastic. We have about 37 communities in BC that have all passed the Declaration for a Healthy Environment. And now we have to go to other jurisdictions, of course, but I'm glad to have Christy being put on the goddamn needle and see where she stands. If she's for a healthy environment or for LNG is all she can care about. So that's why I'm here. I'm nonpartisan in terms of whether I support the NDP, the Greens, or the Liberals. I just want Mr. Harper to get the hell out of office, and I hope we're going to be You see, my grandparents came to Canada from Japan between 1902 and 1904. My mom and dad were born and raised in Vancouver. Dad in 1909, my mother in 1911. They lived all their lives in Canada, but they couldn't vote until 1948 because they were Japanese. The First Nations of this country couldn't vote until 1960. But because of that, I take the right to vote as a sacred responsibility. And I have voted in every election since I turned 21 in 1957. Every federal election, and I have never voted for for a party that got into power. So it just grieves me that with 38% of the Canadian public, Mr. Harper not only got to be Prime Minister, but he got to be Prime Minister with a majority of members of Parliament. There is a need for a drastic overhaul for this system, where people who vote consistently for other issues or parties never achieve the kind of power Mr. Harper has. So we need, obviously, democratic reform to a proportional representation form of government. But I never gave up on this defective system, because throughout my life, opposition had a legitimate role to play. They had the right to demand information and to speak out on issues and to be taken seriously, until Mr. Harper got in. Mr. Harper has been declared by the courts to be in contempt of Parliament because he's not providing the opposition with what is their rightful responsibility to obtain. Not just once, he has simply consistently denied access of our elected representatives in the opposition to information that they need to examine how well our government is proceeding. When the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament, not once but twice, to avoid an embarrassment or possible fall from power, he was undermining the very democratic process that I believe in. And when I heard that robocalls were being made, it was shocking to me that someone would deliberately attempt to keep people from voting. And I would have thought that any government, any party would have risen up in righteous anger and said this goes to the heart of what democracy is all about, and demand that the people responsible be brought to trial, and to reject this as a method of politics. And yet our government, in fact, tried to quash the robocall case. Thank goodness for the Council of Canadians that kept pressing for this. But what kind of a government then will, in fact, support robocalls used to disrupt our very core of our right in a democracy? I was dumbfounded when Mr. Harper canceled the long-form census. How on earth do we how do we guide ourselves into the future? How do we make decisions about this country if we don't have the best possible information on which to base our decisions? This is absolutely outrageous, that because it means then you can do anything you want and use ideology as the excuse for whatever your actions are. I would have assumed anyone offering themselves to govern Canada would want the best possible information going. But then it became clear when you realize, when you knock out the source of good information, you don't have to worry about anything. You just do what you want, and you do it through your own ideological bent. You don't have to worry about telling the truth or being consistent. You can do anything you want. You can say, before getting into power, that the Senate is terrible, it needs overhauling. I will absolutely change the Senate. But once elected, you can pack it with people that are on your side. And the Senate, an unelected body, actually was used to reject a bill that was passed through Parliament, demanding that Canada meet its greenhouse gas emissions targets. And the Senate was used, the Harper Senate was used to turf this out. We have the shutting down of DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, libraries, and literally the tossing out of vital information that was only found in those libraries. We have a Prime Minister who says he's going to expand the prison system at a time when the facts are crime rates have been steadily dropping for years. He's a man who canceled the gun registration, even though law enforcers across the country say that this is necessary and works. We know that safe injection sites save lives, and yet Mr. Harper is absolutely against them. He ignores calls from scientists about the urgency of acting on climate change. He attacks environmental organizations as radical extremists, or accuses him of taking foreign money and operating on a foreign agenda. He ignores economists who tell us if we don't move away from fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions, that it will destroy the economy. And yet this is a man who says that the economy is his expertise and his highest priority. None of this makes any sense to me. I lived in the United States from 1954 to 1962, getting an education that wasn't possible in Canada at that time. And when I was entering my last year in college, in 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Sputnik. I didn't know there was a space program going, and the Americans, who were determined to catch up, tried to launch their satellites, and they had 3 different rockets, an Army, Navy, Air Force rocket. Every one blew up. And meanwhile, the Russians were launching the first animal in space, a dog, Laika, the first man, Yuri Gagarin, the first team of cosmonauts, the first spacewalk, the first woman, Valentina Tereshkova. The Americans didn't flinch. They threw money, and even though I was a Canadian living in the States, it was glorious. You just had to say, I like science, and they threw money at you. It was wonderful. But in 1962, when I completed my education, and it was such a crazy time that I received 3 job offers, and I hadn't even applied for them. I got an offer from Stanford, an offer from University of California, Davis, and San Diego State, and they were just jobs up the wazoo. It was just a wonderful time. I had to take a pay cut to come back to Canada, but I decided I wanted to live in my country, not because it was better, but because it was different. And to me, that difference mattered. To me, Canada was a country, unlike the United States, that didn't just run after money as if money was the very measure of a human being's worth. My Canada was different. My Canada was a peacekeeper, not a war maker. My country was where a CCF, later to be the NDP, could be a respected, legitimate party, whereas in the United States it would have been discarded as a commie, pinko organization. Canada was where a Tommy Douglas could become a national icon and hero, where we had Medicare, where we had equalization payments between the provinces, where we had Quebec and the CBC and the National Film Board. I have never regretted coming home, but for the last 10 years under the Harper government, those things that mattered so much to me have been radically impacted and degraded. Claire will tell you what she knows about the CBC and the difficulties. And they always said, well, it's just cutting the fat. It's not cutting the fat. We're amputating whole programs in the CBC because of the Harper government. In 1988, around the world, the environment had risen to the top of the agenda. Margaret Thatcher was filmed picking up litter in London, and she turned the camera and said, well, I'm a greenie too. In 1988, a guy ran for president of the United States, and he said, if you vote for me, I will be an environmental president. His name was George H.W. Bush. He didn't have a green bone in his body, but he said it because Americans had put the environment at the top of the agenda. 1988, Brian Mulroney was re-elected. And to show his environmental commitment, he appointed his brightest star to be the Minister of the Environment. Anyone here knows who that was? Lucien Bouchard. And I interviewed Lucien Bouchard 4 months after he was appointed, and I said, Mr. Minister, what do you think is the most important environmental issue confronting Canadians today? And he immediately said, global warming. That was impressive. So I said, well, how serious is it? And these are his exact words. It threatens the survival of our species. We have to act now. 1988, there was a major conference of climate scientists, 300 climate scientists at the University of Toronto. Stephen Lewis told me he chaired a couple of the sessions. And the scientists said the evidence is in. Human use of fossil fuels is causing global warming. They issued a press release at the end of the conference that said they said global warming back then. Global warming represents a threat to human survival, second only to nuclear war. And they called for a 20% reduction in 15 years. Think if we had taken it seriously and done it. We would be so far past the Kyoto targets. We would be saving tens of billions of dollars in health costs. And we would be well on our way to a sustainable, renewable, clean energy future. But we didn't do it. So there we are. We've sunk down where climate change hasn't even come up in this election. Hasn't even been discussed in a serious way. Oh, they may have talked about pipelines, but no, not about the issue of climate change. And yet Canada, of all of the industrialized countries, is probably more vulnerable to the impact of climate change than any of the others. We're a northern country. For over 40 years, the Inuit have been telling us climate change is happening and they can see it. This isn't a hypothesis, this is here. We have the longest marine coastline of any country in the world. Water's property is when it gets warm, it expands. Sea level rise from thermal expansion alone will impact Canada more than any other nation. And when the great ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica fall in, sea level rises will be in the order of tens of meters. And then you think of all of the climate-affected areas of our economy: agriculture, forestry, fisheries, tourism, winter sports. We are so vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And where is that in the discussion in this election that's coming up now? Long before he was Prime Minister, well, I can tell you an anecdote. I was in Parliament in the buildings when Stephen Harper was the head of the Reform Party. And he was being interviewed right there in the halls of Parliament. So I went up like any tourist, and someone asked him, well, what about doing something about global warming? And he said, if we try to reduce emissions, it'll destroy the economy. And he got away with it. He wasn't challenged by it. So he came off the interview, and when I then got in front of him, and I said, Mr. Harper, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. To his credit, he's remained steadfast in what his objectives are. Look at the response of the President of the United States going to the oil state of Alaska and telling them that climate change is a serious threat, we've got to act on it. And think of Mr. Harper a few weeks earlier than that, 5 days in the Arctic and never once mentioning climate change. Brilliantly, he appointed an Inuk, an Inuit woman, to be the Minister of the Environment. She is an absolutely disgrace to her culture and her people. She's just a mouthpiece for the Harper agenda, which denies or ignores climate change as an issue. You know, if you're the head of a corporation and you deliberately ignore or dismiss information important to you, for you to carry out your duties as a CEO, you can get thrown in jail for willful blindness. What I believe the Harper government is doing is willful blindness. But it's criminal because it's an intergenerational crime. He's leaving it to you to take the brunt of his inactivity on what scientists are telling us represents a huge threat to our survival. Scientists tell us that the opportunity now to avoid catastrophic runaway climate change is very, very short. We can no longer deal with the issue by just little band-aids here and there, fixing things, getting a little more efficient here, and cutting back on our use of fossil fuels there. We have to have a much deeper target than that. And it's clear that if we look at the trajectory over the past 40 years, we're simply continuing on a climb that's catastrophic. And that we have to now, very, very rapidly, not by 2100, not by 2050, much sooner, get off of fossil fuel energy future. And that very urgency and the depth to which the change is going to be needed is our opportunity. This is our chance to look at what the problem is and really get things right. And so I just want to point out that this is what Naomi Klein is trying to do with her LEAP manifesto, but she has tied it. It's not just about climate change, it's about social justice, it's about the place of First Nations people, it's about poverty and hunger. All of these are tied up in the new way we have to go. This is the Great Leap. And you know, I'm an atheist, but man, oh man, do I love the Pope. And if you've read the encyclical, this is an absolutely amazing, brilliant piece. It is such a stirring document. And again, it's because he hasn't divvied things up into bits and pieces. Oh, climate change over here, and social justice over here, and hunger and poverty. No, it's all a part of a single piece. And spirit is also a huge part of this. And he's offered us then the possibility of a very different way of living. I've gone on way too long, I'm sorry, but I really think this is a critical time. Another term of the Harper government will be absolutely catastrophic for this country. And I'm here because I think that Lynne and Claire are the kind of people that we've got to be sending to Ottawa.
Wow, I'm not usually lost for words, but that's hard to follow. So in the next few minutes, Claire and I are each going to introduce ourselves and say a few words about our vision for the future, and then we're going to invite Dr. Suzuki back to the stage to moderate, because then it's your turn, and we're going to open the floor for a town hall on the Canada that you would like to see. So I can't see well enough, but I know there's many familiar faces out there. I'm Lynne Quarmby. I'm a professor in the Department of Molecular Biology and Biochemistry here at Simon Fraser University. And actually the last 2 summers we've been doing a genetic screen in my lab using temperature sensitivity newtons, which is a brilliant insight that Dr. Suzuki had many years ago. And so I wanted to share that his technique is still very valuable to us. It's painful for me, actually, to be leaving my science. I have been doing it for a few decades, couple decades, not a few, couple decades. And it's deeply my passion. So I care very much about life, about biology. I started my career as a marine biologist and an oceanographer. I did a biological oceanography degree at UBC because I love figuring out how animals and plants and all the other organisms work together to create this incredible environment that we have. And one day in the lab, I had an opportunity to watch a film strip of onion cells dividing. And I watched it over and over, and I saw those molecules of the chromosomes condense, and I saw them jostle around and line up at the metaphase plate. And not until that last one finished jostling and they were all lined up, and then they all pulled apart synchronously, half to one side, half to the other side. And I watched that thing over and over, and I just thought, this is insane. How can this be happening? This is like a bag of molecules. This is amazing. But this is life. This is the root of life. So I was hooked, and from that point on, I've been studying the molecular machines that make life possible. And it hurts to walk away from that. The reality is, though, Harper kind of stole it from me before I made the decision to enter politics. Funding for science in this country has plummeted for basic research, the kind of stuff that we do in my lab. And, well, I keep getting tempted to throw lots of things in. I'll end up here for half an hour myself if I do that, so I'm just going to jump ahead. As a scientist, I have my entire life been modestly politically engaged. I've been very, very busy with my career, keeping up with things, raising my son, trying to get tenure, trying to publish, doing all the things that it takes. You kind of have to have blinders on. But growing up as a kid who pretty much lived outdoors and had this passion for nature, I've always been engaged in watching what was happening to nature and what our politicians weren't or were doing. And I saw the ozone problem, and I saw slowly, eventually we dealt with that. And I saw acid rain, and slowly, eventually we dealt with that. And I kept waiting for our politicians to take action on climate change. And year after year, I couldn't believe it wasn't happening. It was getting worse and worse. And I became a climate justice activist. And over the past several years, I have really been living and understanding these deep connections, how our corporate world has outmaneuvered our politicians, and how in many, many ways we've lost our sovereignty. And by not paying attention and by allowing this to happen, we've lost a lot of control. So that decisions get made, our world becomes a series of sacrifice zones for somebody somewhere else to get rich. And that is feeding climate change. So last fall, after I'd already been quite involved in some of this stuff, I got involved in the Burnaby Mountain protests, and I'm not going to tell that story because I'm guessing that you guys I had been more active. My son was grown and gone, and I had tenure, and things were pretty, I had space in my life to be more active. And so I was really tuned in to what was happening, and I was writing letters, and I was writing opinion pieces, and I was meeting with my elected representatives, and I was doing everything I could. I was going to protests. I was speaking at rallies. I was getting arrested doing civil disobedience, and as a civilian, as a citizen, you can't speak any louder than to do public civil disobedience and tell the media why you're doing it. So after the protests on Burnaby Mountain, and I saw that we had generated public support, but that had not translated into any real change. We hadn't changed the direction. Harper wasn't changed. The Conservatives didn't change their mind. Kinder Morgan was still working. They were just going up the valley a little farther, doing their surveying. We didn't change anything. So when Elizabeth May reached out and asked if I would run for Parliament, damn it. I thought I was done. But then I realized that I had to take that next step. And so that's what brought me into it. That's what got me here. But now I am passionately here, and I am very partisan because I could never run for any other party for several reasons. In fact, if the other parties were doing what needs to be done, and they're not even saying they're going to do it, never mind saying it and not doing it, they're not even saying it. If they would do what needs to be done, I could stay here. I could do science. I could teach. I could avoid this wretched job. But I can't do that because I know how important it is. I feel how important it is. I can't turn away. I couldn't live with myself if I turned away. We need to do this. We see Tom Mulcair and Justin Trudeau dancing around approval of the pipeline, just as one example. No one else, other than the Green Party, is stating the reality that we need to leave the bitumen in the ground. And what doesn't get talked about very much, but is definitely in the Green Party platform, is we need to take a very careful look at what we're doing with animal agriculture, which is another important contribution to climate change. So we're doing that as well. And the deeper I look, the deeper I see what the other guys are not doing. Your pinko commie party has moved a long way. They're a long way from where they used to be. And when I hear Tom Mulcair talking about considering approval of the TPP, I am blown away. And when I learned that the NDP voted unanimously unanimously in favor of the Canada-Korea agreement that has an investor-state clause in it, there is no way I can vote NDP. Never mind, could I ever run as an NDP? Sorry. I'm here, I'm running hard, I've done what I can do. I've stepped up, I've done knocking on doors, talking to people, doing events like these. Climate change is getting talked about a lot around these parts in this election, and the response to that is really good. I know that people are on board. I know that what I offer is what people want. But in this election, there's a game going on. What's everybody else going to vote? I'm encouraging people to get out there and be informed voters. Learn about your candidates and learn who's going to represent you. So my vision of Canada, I'm not going to start at this point giving you my vision of Canada, except for the one little part of it. My vision of Parliament is that in Parliament, we have a room in Ottawa where the representatives are there truly representing the ridings that elected them, and that the evidence that they look at in Parliament when legislation comes forward, that there are rules and that there is a culture where the evidence is the best available evidence. It's been rigorously gathered. It's been subject to peer review. It is free of political interference. It is transparent. It is available. It is accessible. And with that baseline, and we have this diversity of representation from all around our country, people bringing their values, the needs from their region, that's where we start our discussions. And when we have that diversity and we have diverse discussions from a solid base of evidence, that's when we make really good decisions as a country. And that's what we need to be doing again. And I'm sorry, but the Green Party is the only one currently where the MPs can truly represent their constituents. We are not bound, we are not whipped, our votes are our own. It's a lot more work. We have to read all the bills, we have to consult with our constituents, we have to do a lot of thought about how we're going to vote. But I will be there, I will represent the constituents of the riding of Burnaby North Seymour, and I hope
Remind me to never be the last on the docket after these two have spoken. I didn't know I could swear. I would have started this weird. I'm going to be really short and sweet because I want to have this end a little bit with a call to action, and I'd like to hear some of your questions. I too am a scientist. I started my career in England ages ago. As a forecaster with the RAF, I went into public weather forecasting and then I emigrated. I don't have a great Petri dish story, although I do remember finding in the Met Office archives one of those old kaleidoscopes, you know, with the old frames on it that you could turn like this. And it was a cumulus cloud building. I would watch this thing for hours, thinking, that's great. But it's not as exciting as seeing things come together and separate. But I'm the same as these guys. I'm a scientist. Everything that I do boils down to data and information. And the reason I got into this was when I started seeing my fellow scientists, primarily those at Environment Canada, literally unable to deliver public weather forecasts unless we were following a 52-word script that we'd been given, because Environment Canada could only afford to translate 52 words, apparently, into French. Seriously, that was the answer. And so we had to use these 52 words. Believe it or not, I kid you not, thunder shower is no longer an allowed term from Environment Canada. Really? Whereas Mr. Hannah-Mansing would say, really? I have just been reading up, and as Lynne said, we, because Green Party candidates are not able to know everything about our policies, I've just been reading up more about the muzzling of scientists. I was reading about a gentleman named Max, and I think it's Bothwell. He studied algae, It took him 160 emails with his department head to have his research allowed to be communicated to the public. We have no national science advisor to our Prime Minister. We do not have funding for Environment Canada, for DFO. This is just abhorrent as far as I'm concerned. And what bothers me the most, see now I'm going to start ranting, never since the time of Enlightenment have we been frightened of letting our scientists speak. NASA, for Christ's sake, NASA puts their boring, nerdy scientists on camera, and yet in Canada, we don't. They actually go through a communications expert, and normally that term is used quite loosely. I am here primarily, though, to encourage you to do and be as active as you can be. Please, we have donated our time this evening. We have come out to talk to you this evening. Do us the honour of promising that you will vote. It is the single most important thing you can do. It is your vote to own. It is your vote to feel good about. It is your vote to be informed about. So when you go into that booth and you come away from that booth, you feel like you've taken part in changing the course of this magnificent country.